The Villisca Axe Murders. On the morning of June 10, 1912, the small farming town of Villisca, Iowa began like any other summer day. Birds chattered in the trees. Horses clopped down dirt roads. And neighbors went about their routines as the sun slid over the horizon. But on the corner of 2nd Avenue, something felt wrong. The Moore home was silent. Too silent. Mary Peckham, the Moore's elderly neighbor, noticed the family hadn't started their usual chores. No children running outside. No laundry on the line. No movement behind the curtains. By 8 a.m., Mary's concern grew into dread. She walked onto the Moore's porch, knocked on the door, and waited. Nothing. She tried the handle. Locked. Mary called Josiah's brother, Ross Moore, who arrived a few minutes later with a key. He stepped inside the dark, still house, and found something so horrific it would haunt the town for over a century. 8 people. All murdered in their sleep. And the killer gone. Ross Moore entered the guest room first, expecting to find the 2 visiting Stillinger sisters asleep. Instead, he found Ina and Lena Stillinger, ages 8 and 12, dead, brutally bludgeoned in their beds. He stumbled backward, slamming the door behind him. "This is beyond anything I've ever seen," he whispered. Sheriff officers arrived, shocked to find that the scene upstairs was even worse. In the main bedroom lay Josiah and Sarah Moore, their faces unrecognizable from the blows of an axe. In the children's room, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, and Paul, ages 5 to 11, lay dead in their beds. 8 victims. All killed silently. All killed with an axe from the Moore's own woodshed. And in every room, one detail stood out. Every mirror and reflective surface had been covered with clothing. Why? Shame? Ritual? Superstition? Or did the killer not want to see himself? What investigators found next made the case even more chilling. The killer seemed to have stayed in the home for hours. Half-eaten food was left on the kitchen table. A plate pulled out. A bowl of bloody water sat in the sink. Someone had washed up. All victims were killed while sleeping. No signs of struggle. Not even from Lena, though she was found in a slightly different position, suggesting she may have woken up. The axe was left at the scene. Wiped down, but still bloody. The killer covered each victim with sheets or clothing. An act of remorse. Or simply an attempt to avoid looking at what he'd done. The house was locked from the inside, meaning the killer likely exited through the back door, locking it behind him. Cigarette butts were found in the attic. Someone had been hiding there, waiting for the family to fall asleep. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It wasn't impulsive. It was planned, calculated, cold. America, between 1911 and 1914, had a strange and terrifying trend. Entire families murdered with axes while they slept. Cities like Colorado Springs, Paula, Ellsworth, Monmouth, and even New Orleans reported nearly identical crimes. Axe from the victim's home. Murdered in their sleep. Lamps dimmed and left at the foot of the bed. Mirrors covered. Food prepared but uneaten. No signs of forced entry. Killer vanished near railroad tracks. The murders happened along a rail line, just like Villisca. Some investigators believed a single serial killer, traveling by train, was responsible for dozens of unsolved murders. A phantom moving from town to town. Never seen. Never caught. And if he passed through Villisca, he may have only stayed long enough to kill. A traveling preacher who attended the same church event as the Moore children the night of the murders. Odd behavior? Absolutely. After leaving town abruptly at 5 a.m., he wrote disturbing letters about the murders. He confessed once, then took it back. Police charged him, claiming his confession was coerced. He was acquitted. But many still call him the man who got away. Local gossip claimed Josiah Moore was having an affair with Jones's daughter-in-law. Another rumor said Jones hired a hitman. Nothing was proven. But in a small town, grudges lasted a lifetime. 2 years later, in 1914, Mansfield murdered his own wife, child, and in-laws with an axe. In the exact same style. Covered mirrors. Food laid out. Bodies posed. Axe left behind. He could have been the Villisca killer. But his alibi for that night was never fully broken. A mysterious man was seen watching the Moore home days before the murders. He wore dark clothing. He carried a bag. He vanished after the murders. To this day, no one knows who he was. Some believe he was the traveling axeman. Others think he was never real, just a shadow created by fear. The investigation was doomed from the start. As soon as word spread, over 100 townspeople entered the house, trampling evidence, contaminating footprints, touching objects. People even tore pieces of the bloody bedding as souvenirs. By the time professional investigators arrived, the scene was destroyed. The killer's tracks were gone. Clues were overwritten. Fingerprints were smudged beyond use. In a town of just a few thousand, fear spread like wildfire. Everyone suspected everyone. And every suspect walked free. The killer had disappeared, whether into the woods, onto the highway, or onto a train. No one ever saw him again. Today, the Villisca Axe Murder House still stands, preserved exactly as it was in 1912. Visitors report footsteps in empty hallways, children's voices whispering, bedsheets moving, doors closing on their own. A heaviness that settles on your neck the moment you walk inside. Paranormal investigators call it one of the most active sites in America. Skeptics call it superstition. But even skeptics admit, some houses hold trauma like echoes. And this house never stopped echoing. 8 people were murdered in their sleep. A killer who waited until the house was still. A methodical, deliberate, silent attack. And vanishing so absolutely, it feels almost supernatural. Over a century later, the Villisca Axe Murders remain unsolved, a puzzle missing its centerpiece. Maybe the killer was a drifter. Maybe a neighbor. Maybe someone who never killed again. Or someone who killed for years across the country. But on that night in 1912, he walked into a quiet house in Iowa. He carried an axe. And before the sun rose, 8 lives were gone. Inside one of America's most terrifying unsolved mysteries. In 1912, 8 people, including 6 children, were brutally murdered with an axe inside their home in Villisca, Iowa. The killer left behind ritualistic clues, covered every mirror, stayed inside the house for hours, and then vanished without leaving a single trace. Was it a traveling serial killer? A local suspect? A political conspiracy? Or something darker and more calculated? 112 years later, the case remains open, and the farmhouse still whispers. For more deep-dive true crime stories, investigations, and cold case mysteries, subscribe and step into the grid. Because here on Mystery Grid, every story is a puzzle waiting to be solved.